but it's 2025. We're all back here, so hooray. Thank you for being here. And we are here for, what number? Our 12th meeting, I think it is today. So thank you for being here. And I just wanted to quickly run through our agenda. You all have an agenda here in your packet, but we will be going through just some high-level overview items like we usually do. Then we'll jump over to Keith Brownlee, who's joining us remotely to hear about an update for the bridge design. Then we will be hearing from Elizabeth about bridge lighting, and we're going to want to get your feedback around which canvas option they should move forward for further study. So we want to get your feedback. We'll do a temperature check like we've done in the past, thumbs up, middle, down, and we'll walk through that. And then we'll hear from about urban design opportunities before public comment, if there is any, and then we'll go through next steps. So that's why we're here today. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So just our regular housekeeping. You've all seen it 11 times before. Go ahead, Twin. So for those of you joining online, you can do closed captioning. It should be coming up, and you can submit questions and emails. This is how you can provide your public input anytime you want to. If you didn't make it today, you can do it in the future. As usual, let's be safe. Please exit if needed out one of the exits. And you all are great. You know how to participate, so thank you. Let's just keep it up. And we will just check in on audio. So if something is not, if you can't hear anything, let us know. And your mics in front of you, you can just hit the button to turn them green to speak, and then touch it again to mute them. Yeah. Does that microphone move closer to your mouth? Yeah, I can. Yeah. Okay, so as usual, let's be curious, ask questions. A lot of this information is input or information for you. We're not collecting input on the design updates, but we are collecting input on the bridge lighting information, and then we're preparing you to collect input in March on some of the other items. So we'll call that out clearly. Next slide. This is all of you. Hopefully you signed in at the front, but if not, we'll send around the sign-in sheet just to make sure we get you all recorded for the meeting notes. And then we just wanted to give you a quick update on where we are for the work plan for you. We have our next couple of meetings that we're starting to plan out. So today, of course, we are honing in on March 20th, so ignore that TBD. We are hoping that March 20th will work for our next meeting, trying to avoid spring break for those of you who may be traveling. And then we are thinking about holding a meeting in May because we think we're going to want some more feedback from you all. So we'll get more information as we go through, but that's what we're leaning towards right now. And then the next slide talks about our discussion topics that we still have to go through. Again, design is an iterative process, so you're going to hear things from the design team that's halfway through design. They're going to come back and you'll see things and it'll look different. And that's kind of just this process. We want to keep you updated throughout the process. Okay, so I am going to hand it off to Keith. And I think if we, yeah, perfect. Okay, and again, we'll have Keith go through his presentation. If we can't hear, we'll let you know, Keith, to speak louder. But I think we'll hold questions, and there's kind of a pause halfway through. We can check in for clarification, and then we can keep going through from there. Okay? All right, I'll hand it off to you, Keith.
Great. Well, thank you, Brandy. I hope you can hear me. I'm in the middle of a storm here. My phone has just given me a danger to life warning, so I'll shout over the melee, but let me know if you can't hear me. Um, so the subject tonight is well, as on the screen, the Bascule Pier as a discussion. Also known to you as the in-water piers. It's the two significantly scaled pieces of infrastructure in the river, and all that's manifest with them. Brandy correctly said that we are showing works in progress, which is to say that, you know, we're not there yet, but it's a kind of full disclosure where we're at, show and tell. Where we will land may not be exactly here, and you know that this is architecture light. In other words, this is about layout and about components, not about architecture, not about style or form per se. So, caveats aside, we want to talk about the components and the adjacencies of those components in those areas. This sort of X-ray shot looking down on the deck, I'll break this down, but you know what it tells you, and what I will repeatedly tell you, is that there are a lot of components at play. It's a complex composition, and of course, our job is to make clarity and simplicity out of complexity. So if you break that X-ray down, the deck is the kind of tangible thing that most people will experience. You've seen this before, the deck shape, and on that deck, aside of the highway lanes, in green there, the cycle lanes, and outside of that, the pedestrian lanes, there is a public realm, but it's not entirely public realm, because within that are parts of the moving bridge, non-public functions, which are the operator houses on both piers and what we are calling the head houses. I'll come back to that because that is a point of considerable debate amongst ourselves and possibly yourselves. If you strip away the deck, you get a framework, and that framework is still a work of coordination. But of course, you know, I'm showing you the moving bridge, but the moving bridge is contiguous with the fixed bridge on either side, and it can't be developed in a silo independent of those. So all of that framing reflects the framing strategy on the fixed bridge that come in. So these longitudinal girders that you can see here, for example, are in the same lateral position as they are on the fixed bridge. So the view from the outside is the same all the way along the bridge, and that's that point of continuity that I've talked about since we first met. So here are the two Bascule piers. This is the shape of them just underneath the deck, and then beneath that, as you go down and take a cut lower down, there's the Bascule chamber itself. Surprising, perhaps to some people, the last time we spoke, is that what's in that is largely void. So what you're seeing here in grey is a big void space. The reason for that, which I'll show you in a moment, is because the counterweight of the moving deck disappears down into that big hole there. So it's a big object, but it in terms of physical construction, it's a perimeter construction with a big hole in the middle. So here's a section cut through that longitudinally. You can see that the Bascule leaf, as we call it, moves up 60 degrees, and the back of it, with this counterweight here, the counterweight disappears into that void space. So just a little bit on the lexicon of moving bridges, so that when any of us give you words that are unfamiliar, that there's at least some clue. So this thing here, which is in fact a hinge, is called the trunnion, sometimes called a trunnion bearing. There are two of those, one each side, and those sit on a trunnion. They sit on a tower, which is the trunnion tower, and then this scalloped radius form here is a guide to this counterweight, which is here. And the thing that moves it is that pulls. Perhaps it pushes. Keith Greasing will tell me if I'm wrong. But as this action, so this shortens and it pulls that counterweight down through that guide. So far, so good. Well, look, it's kind of over busy, this slide, but the point it's making is, well, there we are, a little bit of Latin for you. Out of many, one. So out of that extremely complex composition, we're getting something which has legibility, that it can be read from the outside and from the deck as being a simple affair. I'm sure everybody's seen more than enough of that. That model, again, broken down. So just to explain what these pieces are. So the piled cap is in the water. This big square of concrete sits in the water, and it joins all of the piles that go down into the ground. On top of that is a concrete collar. The top of that concrete collar is at the level, of the 100-year flood. So this thing is a submersible piece. On top of that, which I'd already described, are the trunnion towers and the trunnions themselves. These are what carry the load of the deck down into that load-bearing pile cap arrangement down into the piles. And then built around that is a framework that supports the incoming fixed deck, which is out here. Well, I'm saying it's out here. Well, I hope you can see my mouse. But so this is the primary framework that supports the rest of the bridge. And then layered into that are floor plates for circulation around those moving parts. Again, leaving out this void space, which is where the counterweight slews down to allow the deck to slew up. Here are the primary beams, the bascule girders, and there is the counterweight sitting within it. As you can see, those primary girders sit with those trunnion bearings that rotate. And then tucked between them, obviously it's an electrical procedure. There is a significant electrical room that sits in that space. So it's busy, and there are a lot of elements to contain. That sits within its own waterproof enclosure underneath the bridge, but within the bascule chamber itself. And not my words, but good words, that is the brain of the operation. I previously obviously thought that was me, but clearly not. And it receives signals, it receives instructions from the operator house above the deck that we'll look at in another section of this presentation. So that those two primary girders are then framed with transverse structure across the deck, which will support the deck itself. That framework continues around the outside. This fringe that we have long talked about, this framework that runs around the outside and recesses all of the main structure, so that you get a thin edge, you get a shadow line over all of that primary structure, and it's quite architecturally, at least, is an effective means of giving manners to the composition, reducing, or not reducing the scale, but giving the impression of mitigating the scale. There is a deck over the counterweight, which is independent of this lateral framing. And then this piece of deck sitting over the top is fixed. This is the fixed bridge. Everything that you're still seeing the framework of is the moving bridge. You can see that those girders slot back into the fixed bridge. So there's not a straight line. There's a kind of integrated connectivity between the two. And then we deck the bascule leaf itself. And then you see that that movement is facilitated. Okay, enough perhaps. It's doing it itself. Super. And then, just to go back one, so you'll see that we're still seeing the framework down here. There will be a cladding to that bascule chamber. Now, the idea of that cladding is not weather tightness, because the bascule chamber itself is an unconditioned space. It's more akin to a rain screen and a architectural facade. So shown here as a solid mass, that's just the nature of the CAD model, but we, as you know, are speculating on that being a perforated surface. Then the cherry on this particular cake is, there's a great word here. These are bridge appurtenances, which is a lot of the safety edge conditions, fencing, railings, guardrails. The guardrail refers to the separation of the vehicles from the footway and the bike path. And then you get closable pedestrian gates and vehicular gates to stop bridge users when the bridge is opening well short of the opening leaf, which is back here. So that is a predetermined set of distances from the moving parts back here, safety. Not shown here are the operator house, which sits in this location, and the head house, which sits opposite over here. So at this point, I don't know, Ravi,
Sorry.
are we going to pause? Yeah.
Yeah. Can we just pause real quick? Does anyone have any clarifying questions? That's a lot of information. There will not be a pop quiz at the end of this. So, but I think Keith is trying to help you all understand how complex this is, right? So are there any clarifying questions? Yeah.
just a quick clarifying question about the function and the distinction between the operator house and the head house. The operator house seems fairly self-explanatory, but I'm not quite sure what's the purpose the head house is serving.
Well, may I defer that question because it should be pertinently clear from the next set of slides, which
You're
deals with
just
that subject.
keying us up, Patrick, for the next.
That works fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? And it's okay. Gwen?
I'm wondering about the watertight electrical chamber and its height above the river, and if it's equivalent to what we have today, and just how far over the 100-foot floodplain it is, and what's the performance spec on that?
For the electrical specifically?
Yeah.
So Keith, could you hear that?
I could hear that. I may not be the best Keith to answer that because Keith Griesing from H&H is in the room, but just before if he takes the floor, that's great, but it sits just underneath the deck. It's in this position, and it sits immediately under the deck. So it's physically as high as it can be without being on top of the deck.
Okay,
But
great.
it's well above the 100 and 200 year flood level.
Good to know. Thank you. Any other clarifying questions right now? There will be time at yeah, Valerie.
Just trying to picture what this looks like as it functions. Is the pedestrian gate and the vehicular gate for when it opens? Like, what is the function of the gate?
Yes, those are to stop vehicles and stop pedestrians when the bridge is about to open.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Aaron?
As a follow-up to that, can you just clarify why they're not, say, in a straight line and why they're offset from one another?
Well, they are as I said, they're at prescribed distances from the opening. So there's a minimum distance, but it's largely to do with the fact that if we put the pedestrian gates parallel or sort of continuous with the vehicular gate, which is its requisite distance, then we get into complications because you can see that it's at the break point between the straight deck and then where it flares out around the bascule chamber. So it's a swing gate, and it's about at its maximum. If we had it out here, you would be adding another about 12 feet onto that gate, which is just beyond reasonable.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, well, we'll pause there, and Keith, you can take it away to the summary.
Okay, well, yeah, it occurs to me because even, within the team, by which I mean, the designers, the contractors, the owners, everybody concerned with the project, there is not universal kind of clarity about the drivers for what is emerging as the design. That's both relative to the operations and also to the in particular to the operator houses. So I just wanted to try and summarize the brief. I don't know that I've done that particularly well. I don't know whether this is a summary of the brief or just a brief summary. But these are some of the things that concern us as we go forward. I'll leave that up there for a moment, but I'm going to represent these pictorially in the next slide. So I think I'll just go through them one by one. But again, these are trying to clarify the intent, but that they don't tell you a great deal about how this thing physically manifests itself. It's just the kind of underlying theory or information. So the first one of these, the bascule assemblies are a machine. And I think this is really important to not think of the operator house as a building, to not think of the head house as a building. On deck, they may look like that, but not even to think of the bascule chamber as a building. This is a machine, and that machine, as rendered in green there, involves was a substantial piece of infrastructure. So the operator house and the head house, in one sense, are like the cockpit of a plane, or perhaps the conning tower of a submarine might be a better analogy. And while I'm on maritime analogies, perhaps, so that machine, like all good machines, hides the majority of its workings. It's an iceberg. The analogy really being that the ratio between what you see up here and what you don't see down here, is significant. So there are some clues in this, but they are not standalone items. They are very much physically and philosophically linked with what's underneath. This analogy falls down rather when you start to imagine that this is above water and this is below water. Clearly it's not. It's above deck and below deck rather than above and below water. So back to the plan. Just to say, so this dotted red line, as you've seen, is the line of the opening deck, and everything else outside of that is fixed. Here's that vehicle stop, and here are those pedestrian stops. Those four corners, the bridge is symmetrical around this longitudinal center line, and it's also symmetrical in terms of these facilities along the center line of the bridge. This is foreshortened just to get everything on the screen. So that's a brake line, the white line. So the west is the same as the east, like for like facilities. It will be driven from the west, but in the event of any failures, it's also capable of being driven from the east house. So we have the operator houses, we have the head houses. So to the earlier question, what is the head house? In essence, it's this. This machine is subject in coding terms to regulations, including building codes. That means that requires 2 points of egress. If you're in that machine, you need 2 ways to get out in case of any failures. So one of those ways is up to the operator house, and the other way is up to the head house. So in effect, it's the head of a stairwell. There's some conversations about whether or not some of those electrical facilities could or should be also located within that assembly there. The other thing to note is that, well, here at the top line, life safety, security, and utility paramount. These are part of the machine. They must be impenetrable to the public or to unauthorized persons. They are part of that machine and therefore only accessible to members of the staff that run the machine. So just rather more technical than the red arrow you just saw. So there is a series of staircases and gantries in the vertical and horizontal planes. Now we don't have a lot of space in these things. When it's set out, those black squares are the longitudinal girders, and the trunnions are in these positions. So, and that's the counterweight which goes down inside. So there isn't a great deal of space. So all of that circulation is done outside of the operational machine, so to speak. And there's a lot of structure in here. So the staircase does what it needs to do to avoid all of those other constraints. Those constraints mostly being structure. So over here on the head house, there's been a lot of discussion about where the relative position of that head house should be. Should it be at the back of the path? Should it be on the outside of the deck? Should it even be beyond the deck? Well, it's driven by one thing and one thing only, which is the coloured red arrow as opposed to the outlined red arrows, which have been suggested as alternatives. But that solid red is the only place you can get from this operator house down into the bascule chamber. If you go any further out, you're going to drop down into the water, like a medieval long drop. And if you go any further inboard in an attempt to change the arrangement of that building, you meet structure very soon, and you lose head height, so you can't locate it there. And that's important because it sets out the footprint of the building in space definitively. I've said this previously, there are no public functions. And the truth is that the operator staff need safe access to get into their facility, which is up here. And the maintenance staff, who are incidentally not the same people as the operator's staff, also need that safe access. So they're going up and down, and never the twain shall meet. And they need protection from outside individuals, both visually and physically. So that speaks to something. Unless unless we navigate that speaks to something that's solid. It's not it's not a retail store or a coffee shop. It's part of a machine. So it's not an insubstantial thing. So it's a two-story facility. This is the deck level. This is the upper level, approximately the same footprint. We're working on the size, but you can see that out to out, it's something like 24 feet deep and 38 feet wide. It's bigger than the current operator houses on the bridge, but it's 100 years later. So there's there are better facilities, and I think you would have been into the current facility, which doesn't leave much room even for the imagination. So just to look, I think the next slide would be looking at that deck level. So just to tell you what that deck level does. So there are two parts to it. One is essentially a staircase, also has a little bit of storage and a restroom. And the other part is the garage for the operator's vehicle, so that they don't have to come, for example, on Morrison, they come and they have to park on the deck, which leaves them vulnerable, but it also creates a blockage to pedestrian and cycle throughway. So they come around the back and they're in a secure garage, but it's not a conditioned space. That's just part of the deck. It's outside, but it's fenced, so you can't get in, but it's open to air. There are two colors on here because there are two staircases, well, one above the other. So the green part with the restroom goes up to the control room. The purple part goes down into the bascule chamber. And those two are separate from each other because there is a requirement for a 2-hour fire compartment separation. The architects in the house will know what that means, but really what it means is that if you're getting 2 hours, you've got a significant amount of structure. It's not a lightweight thing; it's a heavy construction in order to separate those out. Just for your information, as I previously said, the maintenance staff and the operator staff are not the same people. It's very rare that the operator staff would go down to the bascule chamber, and conversely, rare that the maintenance staff would come up to the control room. It does happen, but what they've got to do, they don't follow the same staircase. They come out into the garage and back around. That's how that operation works. Above that is this. So there's the same dimension on the outside, but the control room is the green block. It has functional needs. It needs maximum views out. It needs free circulation, and it needs, by request from the people who operate it, an external balcony to allow them to come out and view overview, let's call it that. So those are the components. Again, I don't know, perhaps this would be a good place to pause if there are any questions in the room.
Yeah, that sounds good. Any questions? Okay, I see Bob and then Gwen, and then Jason.
Quick question, Keith. How does the operator's vehicle access its secured garage? It looks like it's having to cross over the pedestrian zone from the vehicular side?
Yeah, it will. Yes, it will. It will travel down the pedestrian bike path on its way here. It's not on the highway. But when it gets to the bascule, it pulls off of there and it's parked off of the path.
And so would the east side operators come up, again, the bike path on that south side of the bridge?
Everybody is coming from the west.
Okay, thank you.
It's a one-way system, which is why the garage is a pull through. You get in. We looked at pull in, reverse out, and all sorts of scenarios, but it lacks clarity.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob. Gwen?
I have a question about elevators. Are you required to put an elevator in addition to stairs?
No, I don't want to. I don't want to undersell your question, but no, there's no requirement.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gwen. Patrick?
A couple questions for you, Keith. First, the height of the 100-year floodplain, has that taken into account any escalation for anticipated changes from climate change? I've seen A lot of that happening in building design, where they're designing our HVAC systems for anticipated hotter climates. Does climate change impact the potential 100-year floodplain, and are we anticipating that here?
Well, there's, if I had a dollar for every, well, maybe if I had a dollar for every inch of sea level, perhaps I'd be better off. But what I was going to say was that that the exact science of where that 100-year flood is not clear to me, but it's well above it's above the required level for the brief that we have. But what I would say is that this, in common with any other facility like this, in the bottom of that thing, it's just a sump, and that sump will have a pump to clear it out. It is floodable. There's nothing in there that would suffer from occasional overtopping.
Thank you. One further question. I think early on in the process, we had heard that the National Park Service had a requirement that there was no above-deck structures on the west side of the bridge to not mitigate any of the views into that historic district. Now we're seeing the structures above deck on both sides. Has there been a change in the opinion from the Park Service, or an exception or a compromise that we've reached?
Well, as told to me, and perhaps somebody in the room could correct me if wrong, I mean, that's a semantic thing. My understanding was that there was to be no structure by which, it is to be superstructure, the structure that holds the bridge up. I don't think there was ever any concern over replicating the building that's already in the existing situation.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So I saw Jackie and then Aaron. Oh, okay. Yeah, Ed. Sorry, I didn't see that behind the computer.
I would try to respond to Patrick's question, because one thing I've been interested in is what the restrictions are on design at the west end, and I think we're going to hear more about that tonight. But I believe Sharon and I are on the committee that is dealing with the historical aspects of the bridge on the west side, the consulting parties committee. And in that group, I think I learned that the restrictions on what can be built on the west side pretty much stops with the edge of the river. That was my reading of, somebody else might correct me, in the programmatic agreement that the county has with the other agencies, state and federal, is there are restrictions over the land, but not over the river. So that's my understanding, that there's not a historical restriction once you get past the waterfront.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Ed. Sharon, I'll come back to you. So Jackie and then Aaron and then Sharon.
So you were talking about the operator house and then the maintenance area. And am I correct when you said that that they can't be accessed from each other, that they can only be accessed from outside?
They can be accessed. Yeah, it's not the same stairwell. There's no continuous vertical circulation between the control room and the basket chamber. So they have to circulate outside, but it's within the secure garage. So they're coming from a conditioned space into a unconditioned space and back into a conditioned space.
So if maintenance was coming and they want to talk to the bridge operator, they would have to go into the house. And then if the bridge operator was talking to maintenance and they wanted to go down into maintenance for some reason, they'd all have to exit and go back in.
Yeah, they come via the garage, yes.
And is it for fire suppression? Is that the reason why there's no connection?
Yes. Well, the disconnection is fire compartmentalization. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Aaron?
So this comment isn't directed necessarily directly at Keith, but maybe at the entire process and the values of the process. And it's probably a deeply naive comment, but I'm going to say it anyway, that I'm just a little shocked and more than a little disappointed to find that at this really critical juncture in the project, it's going to be permanently housing a vehicle. And so maybe it's just from our tour of the existing bridge. I don't recall there being a vehicle there. And so I know that bridge was designed before mass adoption of automobiles. But I'd like to think we're not necessarily so firmly entrenched in that paradigm now. And it's just, I just find it shocking that this spot that maybe I had kind of envisioned as the bridge kind of widens, that might be a great opportunity for an overlook for people to enjoy the view, to congregate. I know it's on the closed, gated part of the operating bridge, but it just seems, unfortunate that we're going to take that prime moment in the bridge and use it to store a vehicle. And similarly, it makes me wonder how frequently that's being used, because we've done all this work to design such a beautiful pedestrian experience. And I know it's just a single vehicle, but I don't want to see any vehicles over there at all, to be perfectly frank. So I hate that. And maybe one question to consider might be, I know on some level it probably makes sense. Well, two questions. One, are there two garages? And second, do those garages both have to be on the south side? Is there an opportunity to flip those potentially so that, and I know you're saying they're coming from the west to the east, but just thinking that the possibility of having a place to congregate and look to the south around that headroom as opposed to two operator houses seems like it might have some value. I know that probably doesn't work, but anyway, I said it was naive.
No, that's why we're here, to ask questions. Keith, do you have an answer about or do we want to phone a friend?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't. I don't. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the public realm aspect of this is, big on our agenda, everybody's agenda. And there are places. One of the issues is that it's controversial to have public access behind those buildings, riverside of them, because of security and their invisibility when the bridge opens. I mean, what the operators will tell you, and I have a great deal of sympathy with it, is that people love to be the wrong side of the barriers and hide and try and ride bridges. So there's a visibility aspect to that. I mean, it's just a sort of an aside, really. In terms of the operations, what happens at the moment is that the operators drive to the end of the bridge on the west side, park, and walk onto the bridge, which is not very satisfactory from their point of view. So the brief says, can we drive to the bridge? So from our point of view, that garage is a kind of act of discretion, put it that way. Anyway, but I'm hoping that we will come on to the public realm aspects, not so much on the bridge in this CDAG, because you can see from this, right, that there's a lot of information here, but there's nothing tangible in terms of experience or aesthetics. So we need to flush out these technical issues and then come back to you on what it means to the public realm. But the public realm's going to be great. That's all I would say.
So I saw a lot of tents go up about the desire for the operators to have the garage there. Keith, I know we're running out of time for your section. There are a couple more questions, and then I'm hoping we can quickly go through the rest of your slides. So I saw Sharon and Ed, I don't know if it was for both of you together. Okay, and then Valerie, and then I think we might pop through the rest of your slides, Keith.
Yep, there's only a couple of slides left. So
Okay,
that's-
great. Just hit the green button.
My question is, how have we gotten along this many years with our bridges and there has not been a parking garage? I mean, is this new code? Question.
It's not code, but it is the county's brief. I mean, as I said, on Morrison, they drive on the bridge and park outside of the op house. All this is doing is trying to tidy that relationship up.
So Megan can maybe answer some of this.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. You're right, we've not had cars throughout this whole 100-year life cycle of this bridge, but over the years, the operators have really felt unsafe performing their duties on the bridge. So, they're called out to the bridge at all hours of the night. And so parking the car and then walking at night to the operator house, I've heard some people feel unsafe. On the Morrison Bridge, we bought a smart car because it's so tiny, so that people could drive onto the bridge and park the car next to the operator house. Those cars get smashed in the windshield. And I think with this approach, we want to just provide a safe place of work really for the operator, which is why we're including a garage here. It's really to ensure respond to operator feedback.
And Megan, can you answer the second part of Aaron's question about how often are cars parked on the bridge?
Yeah, so whenever there's an operator called out for a lift, which on Burnside is on demand, then the car will be used. But with this new bridge, we're thinking about making it the 24/7 operation center for all of our bridges. Right now, that's Hawthorne. So any time of the day, you can call the Hawthorne, someone will be there. It's our eyes and ears all the time for our collection of bridges. But we're thinking with this improved space that we might transfer that to this bridge.
Thank you. Second question. So if I wanted to see a bridge that has garages on it, where would I look?
So that's my phone a friend with Keith Greasing.
Maybe I could also sidestep and ask the moving bridge expert in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Keith that got donated to answer this. I'm Keith Greasing with H&H. I'm the movable bridge design lead working with Beam. So there's not a lot of, I'll say, precedent examples on this particular instance.
Are there any?
No, not that I'm aware of that have a physical enclosed protected space. I will say we are in a parallel state with a number of bridges that are putting a similar parking type facility that is not protected. And in the discussions that we had with the county as part of this project, they felt that having that parking area protected was of utmost importance, not only for the safety of the vehicle, but for safety of the staff using it. And there's a lot of discussion in this topic relative to the operators, but it is also dual purpose for the maintenance personnel. So maintenance personnel are usually coming up there with equipment, oilers, and other things that they have to carry of some weight. So the ability for them to drive up to the bridge and not have to lug their equipment the length of the bridge is definitely advantageous. So we opted for what we're calling a garage, but as Keith noted, is really open fenced space on three sides and enclosed on the one side with the solid wall of the staircase is the best compromise to achieve all these goals.
When could we expect to see a kind of a sketch of what that's going to look like?
I think there might be
In
some.
1 minute.
Yeah, in 2 slides.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
so I do want to quickly get through the rest of your questions. I saw Valerie, then Eric, then Aaron, Patty. You're just getting in under the wire. So, okay. Valerie.
So there's been a lot of reference to safety and security, especially like ground level, not wanting the public to have access, and now we're talking about the security of the operators. Has there been exploration of other options to keep operators safe and their vehicles safe than this particular operator vehicle through route?
We might have to pause on that, and come back to you with an answer about other safety considerations. Do you all have an answer to that? What other safety considerations have you looked at besides the enclosed garage?
I don't really have an answer because it's a question of briefing, and it's a question of design, really. We always look at 1,000 iterations, but the ingredients kind of add up to this kind of jambalaya.
And I'm guessing, Valerie, you'd like to see them look at some other options.
I mean, yeah, we've been talking about having a safe bridge, including for pedestrians. It seems like we would be working towards something that's keeping everybody safe on the bridge rather than just the operator vehicle occasionally, or operator.
Great. Okay. We might have to come back a little bit. I think it was Eric, and then Aaron, and then Patty.
Oh, thank you. My bike route takes me on the Morrison Bridge coming to and from work, and I know the little smart car that you're talking about, and that does create situations where if you have somebody coming from the east and somebody coming from the west and a pedestrian, then you get this moment where nobody knows what to do, and it does turn into safety things. And so something like this, not only for the practical dimensions of the maintenance crew and the safety of the bridge operators, but I would think for the pedestrians and the cyclists with the expanded bike lanes and pedestrian lanes, like this seems like a very elegant solution. So I really like to see something like this. So I just wanted to say my personal experience with that.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Aaron, and then Patty.
I appreciate the previous comment, but I tend to disagree entirely that I think the presence of a vehicle in a pedestrian zone is alarming, and when it's coming head on, you don't know who's driving that or why it's there, but it would strike me as something that is out of place. I appreciate the employee's desire for a sense of safety, but I would question at what cost to the general public, including tourists and visitors from out of town, their sense of safety to find a vehicle moving in an area where they thought they were away from cars. We're building a high-tech bridge that's of the 21st century, and I think putting a 20th century vehicle on there is really a bad decision. And so, I think it's out of step with Portland culture in general. We have made great improvements in bicycle technology, including the B-line sustainable development. So it's not just a two-wheel bicycle or an electric bicycle, but there are many ways that you could move people between these locations that don't require a car. And I would encourage you to look into them.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Patty.
Well, I rather agree with what Aaron has said. Sorry. I rather agree with what Aaron said, that really the space on the south side of the operator house is the primo space for pausing and enjoying the view. It's out of the wind. It's got the view south towards downtown. It's the primo space, and to fill that with a garage seems an appalling thing to do. I wonder if you mentioned a smart car or maybe a golf cart, and that storage space in pale blue there might be enlarged very slightly to accommodate that vehicle. So you could leave the space behind the operator house open and unencumbered so people can walk through there. if there's a truck bringing equipment for repairs or whatever, then on that occasion, it would park exactly where the car is shown, but it wouldn't be permanently built in. It wouldn't be permanently off limits. I think Aaron's absolutely right. We're going to tremendous lengths to make this a good place for pedestrians and bicycles, as well as motor vehicles. And this seems like sacrificing one of the really finest places on the bridge. So I would encourage looking for a different solution.
Great, thanks, Patty. Okay, Keith, we are running behind officially. So if we can skip through the next few quickly, I want to make sure that Elizabeth has enough time. And then if there are additional comments, we can collect those so that if there are things that we don't get answered, let's get them answered for you by email.
Yeah, okay. So this was a very interesting debate. I mean, it is a very interesting debate. But I don't want to get the impression that the thing is being driven by this requirement for the car. In a way, you know, this is collateral to the other thing. Is that we have got, this is the upper level. We've got a de minimis requirement for what goes up there, but there's less stuff goes underneath it. The stuff that's underneath it is a staircase and a restroom. So there's a scale mismatch between those two things. You just so happen to have then a covered space underneath, which is, the debatable, the debatable idea about whether or not you use that privately or publicly. So those ingredients are this: a glass box with an overhanging roof that sits on a concrete frame, and underneath that is a stair pod. And as I've previously mentioned, that stair pod is replicated on the other side of the deck in order to have that secondary means of egress. If you collapse those things, you get this kind of form. This is a cartoon, not a building design. But it's all about this. It's about getting free circulation and clear visibility in that control room. There's also a pair of requirements, as I previously said, that by recessing that glass box, you get a wraparound balcony, which is desired. You also, because of the orientation of those operator houses, get shading against glare. Glare is a very big issue in buildings that are, functionally set to be having clear sight out. We've talked about this. There's the vehicular route coming through what is labelled garage, but is actually residual space to that idea that what you've got upstairs is bigger than what you've got downstairs, right? And then you've got that staff through route for the head house on this side. So look, I don't want to give you the impression that this is architecture. It's not. It's those components put into a model to see what falls out of it. So that green box is the stair pod. The concrete frame over the top that holds up the glass box. You've got an overhanging roof and you've got some structure to hold up that roof. And there's kind of conversations between the framing of this and the framing of this. So the odd man out from that discussion is the garage, which is this drive-through use of the residual space. But that is, that's about magnitude. So that thing is the embryonic form of the operator house. That thing, when you take away the control room, what you're left with on the other side is that thing. So there's this notion where we don't know what these will be in form, but there's this notion that on the south side and the north side, you get reciprocal pieces of construction. And part of the reason for that is this. This is a very traditional thing in bridge design. There are reasons for it, which I'm not going to go into, but you'll see these all over Oregon, all over everywhere. That the center span, usually, and sometimes the entire span, is marked by these, well, these corner markers, these obelisks. It's replicated time and time and time again. So there's something that speaks to that idea of having, well, look here. So in really basic terms, here are those blocks. I don't think they'll be as tall or as blank or as boring as this, but it's that object sucked out of this composition popped over here. So you get 4 blocks. You take the actual operator house away, you're left with 4 blocks on the corners that mark the center of the span, that mark the moving bridge. And there's something that portalizes that, and I think that will be very clear to the bridge users as they pass there. They know that they're passing into the center span. Then very briefly, this is what we have to respond to, and I mean that decidedly. We have to respond to this. Right? These are the best bits of that bridge, unless you're a kind of structures nerd like me. The materiality and the color of these are interesting. This is not. I mean, these are masquerading as 19th century from the early 20th century. I don't want to masquerade to be either 20th or 19th century in the modern era, but there are clues in here. So what could we use? Patinated copper. It's a very traditional moving bridge material. Glazed blocks and bricks is something that might be of interest. The 2-hour fire is difficult, but here, could these blocks be illuminated? Does the glass vulnerable? Well, yes, but there are ways and means. This product down here is called Cal Wall, which might begin to deal with that, so that those blocks might become corner lanterns rather than corner blocks. I think we're over-egging the pudding here a little bit, but this is the kind of magnitude of those things, right?
Great. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll get a date for you all of when we can try to collect comments back, because I know this is a lot and a lot to take in. And I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth. And Elizabeth's going to talk about the bridge lighting, and this is one item that tonight we would like to get your input on, and we're going to do a temperature check after she goes through her presentation about how you're feeling about the lighting canvas, and she'll explain all of this. So I'll hand it off to you, Elizabeth.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Johnson. I'm from HLB Lighting Design. I'm happy to be back after meeting you all last time, or most of you. So I think we can go to the next slide. So tonight, what we're going to talk about with aesthetic lighting is the aesthetic lighting canvas. So let's go to the next slide. So just a little reminder, when we're talking about aesthetic lighting, we're really thinking about the lighting that's on the structure. And there's also the lighting that is used functionally. So that's lighting the streets, lighting the pedestrian path, the bikeway. But right now we're going to focus on how do we highlight this structure itself. So as we dug into what our concepts would be, we looked at the different parameters that we needed to focus on. How do we want this bridge to look at night? And as we think about that, we take into consideration a few different things. We've got a budget from the county. We've got input from stakeholders. We have this beautiful structure with unique opportunities, and how can we feature those at night? And how do each of those things look as we look at this structure from all different angles? What's it like when you're passing across the bridge? What if you're off of the bridge looking at it if you're passing underneath it. So from all those different view sheds, we're going to consider how these aesthetic lighting concepts look. So we'll go to the next slide. So we had a lot of help when thinking about what the community stakeholders thought by taking a look at the guiding principles that you all shared with us. And there are a few that aesthetic lighting can really help support. So one of those is, how do we support balancing the scale between these different aspects of the fixed bridge and the movable bridge? How do we, create its place in the Portland skyline in an appropriate manner that helps blend in with what's already there and celebrate this new bridge? But of course, we also want to be sensitive to the nighttime environment, so we're respecting dark skies, we're being thoughtful about minimizing effects of lighting on our surrounding natural environment. And we also want to support the idea that's come from this group of the bridge being a beacon of safety, and how can we support that with the lighting. And above all, we're expressing Portland values, and so we're trying to do that. I think we were already addressing a lot of that with these principles that are guiding us. So let's go to the next slide. So let's be clear about what is an aesthetic lighting canvas. So our goal for this meeting is to really set what parts of the bridge make sense to light. What is the canvas of light that we're going to have and be able to use aesthetically? And so if we focus on that this meeting and we get to a place where we understand what the canvas is, in March, we'll be able to talk about scenes, which is where we can talk about color, is it static, is it dynamic, all those aspects of light. So just as an example, the bridge that's up here is I-74, goes across the Mississippi River between Iowa and Illinois. And so this bridge right here, all in white light, is showing its canvas. The decision was made to only light the underside of the arch. They had to decide which sides of the piers to light, the fact that they are not lighting the edge girder, and then they made a decision that only the arch is color changing. So with that established canvas of that bridge, if we go to the next slide, then we developed the scenes, which you see here. So that community thought about which events, which festivals, which seasons did they want to celebrate with different colors or motion or static scenes. And so that's what we'll talk about with this bridge in March. But to get there, we have to figure out what parts of this bridge do we want to light. So let's go to the next slide. So, taking into consideration all of these principles and then applying them with light to the bridge, let's go to the next slide. We're going to dig into the concepts here. Go to the next one. Okay. So, this first concept we're calling internal glow. And here we are on the bridge and we have the opportunity to look at the tower. And this tower is lit with floodlights inside the opening of the tower. So we're highlighting that area that's in shadow during the day. It becomes the lit area at night. We also have a floodlight at the top that's highlighting the full height of the tower with light that's shining down and illuminating that top piece of the tower. So you get to see and celebrate the whole height of the tower, but really bringing it into this slender focus. Let's go to the next slide. So we're going to try to point out how we're seeing some of those principles being pulled into the lighting here. So this tower lighting is giving the tower a definite place in the skyline while keeping it limited so that we are not overpowering the neighbors, but it's still distinctive. And all the light is mounted shining 90 degrees or below, straight down, not up or out and away from the surface, except if it's inside the structure, so inside that opening. We are lighting up those interior surfaces, so following that dark sky best practice. And then the thing I want to note here about the beacon of safety, I think where that comes in is more actually in the functional lighting. And so that's, you've got your roadway pedestrian poles there, which isn't necessarily the focus of what we're going to talk about tonight. But I think the way that the lighting is going to help support that idea of a beacon of safety is if you have uniform light that feels comfortably bright, you have enough light on people's faces. That's the kind of space that makes me feel comfortable to walk through. And if you feel comfortable to traverse through it, that feels like a good, safe environment. And it's not about having some big, bright beacon on the bridge. It's about, are we making an environment that's comfortable for people to move through? So let's go to the next slide. So here's another view of this same concept from off of the bridge. And so we're getting an opportunity to see the edge girder, which is lit with lights that are tucked behind the outside fascia, aimed straight across at the deeper girder that allows that to glow and highlight that horizontal element so that are we not only celebrating the vertical of the tower, but the horizontal connecting from shore to shore. In addition to that, we have our bascule pier with the perforated metal panel. And here the lighting is inside, and it's highlighting those structural features that Keith was just talking about. So you have those big structural bascule beams, and you have the, is it the trunnion? I apologize. Keith? Thank you. Okay, you have the trunnion in the back to help do the pivot. And highlighting those internal pieces really shows off one of the things that I think makes this bridge pretty special. So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to remind folks, renderings can do a lot, but with lighting, sometimes photographs help too. So those middle images are showing examples of lit structure behind a perforated panel. So it's that internal glow showing off the inside that you don't see during the day. That's the effect that you would get with lighting those internal components. Versus the outside images where we're applying light to the outside of a perforated panel. And so that's highlighting that surface and showing it off more as a solid than something that's a see-through. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so here's the first option to think about. So this one is showing that same concept, except we're adding a second layer, which adds a layer of light at the base of the bascule pier, lighting up on that perforated metal panel surface. So you would have 2 layers of light there at the bascule pier. So it could be that some evenings you only light the exterior, or you only light the interior, or you balance both. So it gives you an extra layer along with the other lighting that we've talked about so far. And we'll go to the next slide. And so we've got our principles again to talk through about, showing how we are trying to balance that vertical with the horizontal, giving them some equal weight when it comes to light, as well as we're showing here that we are not necessarily lighting up into the sky. There's one reason why in these concepts you're not going to see the lighting up of the cables. And that's because we wanted to, as much as possible, keep light directed down and not going out into the environment. It's focused on the structure itself. And to that as well, we're also trying to minimize light going down into the water. That's why the underdeck lighting is aimed 90 degrees and slightly above to keep the direct illumination on the structure itself and not going down into the water. Let's go to the next slide. So this is that same concept, but we're taking it onto land. So you're seeing that floodlighting of the edge girder continuing over land, as well as in that park, we're adding in some floodlighting of the land-based piers. So there's more vertical illumination in that circulation space to complement the functional lighting that you're seeing illuminating down into that circulation area below the bridge. Let's go to the next slide. And those additional layers of light, I think, really help with that sense of safety as you're trying to travel underneath a structure like that. You have some vertical illumination so it feels brighter, as well as balancing that functional light so that there's a more uniform lighting and it's easier to move through, as well as continuing our distinctive aesthetic lighting that's going to carry all the way across the bridge. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to our second concept. It is similar, but it is slightly different. So this is using a direct view line of light all the way from the top of the tower, and then it splits and frames the opening in the tower. So a direct view fixture is a fixture that's meant to be looked at. So think about something like neon or like a glowing element. It's a soft light, so you're meant to look at it itself, but it is pushing light out from the surface for you to look at versus directing light in a particular direction, like a floodlight that we've been looking at so far. But this strongly frames the tower, and because it's a direct view line of light, it has the opportunity to do different color and motion over the vertical of the tower. So it has the opportunity to be more dynamic vertically on the tower here. So let's go to the next slide. So this is very similar, but so this will be another distinct view to add into the skyline. I think still well balanced with its neighbors, and we have our same functional light. But because that is a direct view light and it isn't directed 90 degrees or lower, completely down, it isn't technically fully dark sky. But it is within compliance of the city of Portland, which we did consider what their requirements are for their different facades and building lightings. So let's go to the next slide. So we take that second view, we're looking at the same tower with the direct view line of light. Because it's a more elaborate lighting, there's more fixtures involved with the tower, we have less of the budget to spend on the pier. So this is using just the exterior light to uplight that perforated metal panel on the outside. We still have that same edge girder light that's going across because we still think it's important to fully highlight the horizontal as well as the tower to keep them in balance. Let's go to the next slide. And so you'll see much of the same comments about how we're marking out the different principles with resolving that scale between the fixed and the movable bridge. We are having that skyline landmark look for the tower. We are trying to minimize the light, and we are minimizing the light in the water, but we do have a little bit more light going out into the sky because we have that direct view fixture on the tower. Let's go to the next slide. And I'll just point out, because over the park, we're just seeing the edge girder, this solution is the same in both because we have the edge girder lighting and we're having the land pier lighting for good sense of safety and circulation. So we can go to the next slide and see those same points there. And we'll go to the next slide again. Okay. So we cruised through that a little bit because I want to make sure we get a chance for folks to think about and respond and see what you all think of this. So I'll just note on here on the left, we have the park that we saw, but the things that we have to talk about are these two different approaches to how that tower is lit, as well as the three different ways, the three different layers almost of light on the pier with it, whether it's just that internal structure light, it's just the exterior floodlight of the perforated panel, or it's both where we can have that. Sure, let's go to the next slide. So what we're looking for is the opportunity today to hear a discussion about this lighting canvas that we've brought to you all. We're hoping that these lit elements get established so that when that's settled, we can all talk about scenes and colors and motion and how that aesthetic lighting is used.
Yeah, awesome. So we might have to go back and forth between that one previous slide. I want to just get clarifying questions before we do a temperature check. So I see, let's see, I do not know who went first, so I'm going to go Patty, Gwen, Ian, and Eric. And did I get it? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. I know that you're well aware of this, but the reflection of the edge of the bridge in the river is enormously important. Everyone here is familiar with what the Tillicum Crossing looks like and what the Morrison Bridge looks like at night. And it's really, that reflection is very important, not to be confused with direct shining of lights into the water, which is what the wildlife people get upset about. So I just wanted to make that a really clear point. Another point is that in one of the options you show where you have more elaborate lighting on the tower, then you have less elaborate lighting on the piers in the middle of the river. I'd point out that once the glass has got a bit scuzzy and got some bird poop on it and the rest of it, you won't see what's inside. What you'll see is irregular reflections off the glass off the outside. And I don't think that that's going to be very lovely. And I think, therefore, the earlier scheme you showed, where you're really illuminating from inside the operating house, makes a whole lot more sense. I think that would work much better. Those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Gwen?
My question dealt with so you'd said that the line of light offered more opportunities for color on the tower, but would there be opportunities for color in the girder too? Like, is that area?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we could still have some fun even if we didn't.
Yes, there are purposely smaller fixtures on the girder so that there is an opportunity for smooth color changes or motion across.
I have a follow-up question. Are you looking at all at the lighting inside the operator house itself? Because I think at night it's going to become its own lit object, especially if it's a 24-hour facility, so.
Yes. We have removed it because, as you saw, it's under discussion, but you bet once it's there, we're going to light it as part of this composition.
It's going to be in play. So.
Yep.
Great. Ian?
So I'm a little bit concerned with the lines of light that, even though it meets Portland standards, that it's not technically dark sky. So I'm a little bit hinky about that. I'm also disappointed by the fact that the lines of light will be sufficiently more expensive to curtail the lighting of the piers internally. And especially like looking back at the schematics for the piers, if they were to do the kind of transparency on the the bank sides of the piers as well. That could add further engagement for people who are walking along the river looking from underneath the bridge toward the bridge piers. Because there's no reason that that has to be solid, looking at the schematics. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Eric?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the undermount lighting for the girders, I think is a really, really nice addition. And I think when we're talking about, eyes towards safety and everything, as someone who's been working under that bridge for the last 20 years, I can say in that area, that's fantastic. And my clarifying question is about the lamp posts there. So I know this is probably not part of the bridge per se, but is additional lamp posts like I see there, which I don't think are there now, is that part of this project too?
Who wants to answer that?
I
think
I don't know the extent of the functional lighting that's going to be done underneath the bridge if it goes beyond the width of the bridge, but I believe the electrical engineers, and we're working with them to make sure we're coordinating all our lighting, is looking at the functional light at least directly under the bridge.
And I think you were talking about on bridge.
Well, I was talking about both. I just looking at the picture and I'm like, that looks really nice.
Oh, underneath
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it is being considered, but that might be something we can follow up with you about exact numbers. Sorry, I didn't say that into the microphone, but we can get back to you. Okay. I saw more signs up. Okay, so Susan and then Gabriel. Oh, okay, thank you.
I think it's really nice looking. I like the scheme. I like the lights inside the bascule a lot. I like that when they're a little brighter. It's beautiful. Of course, red's my favorite color. And I love the lighting down in Waterfront Park. And even Gumby looks pretty good with the way you've lit him up. I'm not fond of the garage, and I think it kind of stands out. I mean, and I think if it's lit, it's going to stand out even more. It's sort of awkward looking up there. So I know we're going to be talking about the garage further, but right now I'm kind of erasing it in my mind, and I'm enjoying the look of the bridge as you've lit it. Thank you.
And I know in future slides, this is somewhat getting addressed, but the plan with the side girders and the functional lighting underneath the bridge, that's going to extend all the way on the east side as well. So this look
Yeah.
carries from ground to ground.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, great. Okay, Twin, do you think you can go to the thumbs up? Okay, so, oh yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Just to clarify, I apologize coming in at the very end, but I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a tremendous difference between the internal glow and the lines of light. I mean, for a majority of the bridge, we're talking pretty much internal glow, right? So, for instance, when we're looking at the view from the underside of the bridge, we still see the same point lights on the underside. And so I just feel like lines of light, to me, doesn't even feel like a viable scheme because it's just relying entirely on the internal glow for a majority of the scheme. So other than what it does for the inverted Y, I have trouble really understanding how someone coming to this and looking at that image on the left is going to see those point lights and that internal glow on the underside of the bridge and say, yeah, this is about internal glow. Or I'm sorry, that this is about lines of light. I will also say that I agree with the comments about the internal glow of the bascules. I think is quite nice, and I don't really see the benefit of having an external light lighting it up. And I'm assuming that the color change between the kind of yellow and the cooler lights at the bascule, I don't know if that's intentional or what that's doing, but it seems a little unclear in my mind.
I think in this case, because we're trying to hit one basic white light color temperature, it's expressing the different finishes. But you're right. If we set a white light scene with these, we could dial it warmer or cooler so that they are more balanced.
And I am not a lighting engineer like Elizabeth, but I will just say that when she showed this before, I kind of had the same question as you, Erin, and I think it's a good clarifying question for the inverted Y. Like, what's the difference between the internal glow versus the lines of light? And Elizabeth helped me understand the internal glow was that spotlight kind of going down, and so correct me, but it's like it fades almost, and you can kind of see it in this image where it's brighter at the top and more muted than at the bottom, whereas the lines of light is like a solid color of light, and it can be changed more easily. Am I right? So it's like more variable.
Yeah, that would be the difference between the towers.
Yeah, okay. So that, I know, I was like, what's the difference? But yeah, Gwen?
Okay, super quick follow-up. The underside of the bridge, mostly core 10, all core 10, some concrete in there?
All core 10, I'm kidding.
So colored light might not work as well on that surface.
Tell us.
We will talk about that in March.
But it's possible.
It is possible. It's not the same, right, as colored light on a light gray white surface, but we can do color.
Okay, do people feel comfortable doing a temperature check? Oh my gosh, Jackie, I'm so sorry. And, Bob, okay. You all just want to talk tonight? Okay, Jackie and then Bob, and then we have to do the temperature check, okay.
No, I just want to be really clear. So the difference basically is with the internal glow, you don't have as much lighting on the Y, the inverted Y, but you have internal light in the bascule area. Will you also have floodlight on the outside too? So you'll have light interior and exterior?
So just with what we're going to look at and take a temperature check on tonight, think of internal glow, that's that tower scheme where we have light all pointed down. So you got a floodlight down so it grazes and fades out, and then we light up the portal. Lines of light, we light up the portal, and then we have a consistent line of light that frames the portal in the top of the tower. So that's really about two different concepts, approaches to the tower. And then for the pier, we have the light only inside, light inside and outside, 2 layers, or outside light.
Right, and which scheme is which? So in the internal glow, you have light inside and out. You have the choice of light inside and out. And in the lines of light, you only have exterior light.
Yeah. And if you really like it, because there seems to be some interest in it for internal glow, if you just want to have the lights on the inside, you can just have lights on the inside, not add that extra layer.
So on lines of light, is it a price
Yeah.
issue? Is that why so it's more expensive to do lines of light, therefore it limits us to an interior or exterior light on the bascule?
Yeah, and to light the interior of the bascule takes more luminaires, more fixtures, which is why we're only showing exterior light for that lines of light concept.
Okay, thank you.
Bob?
As you developed your identification of the canvas and plausible strategies for the lighting technology, a helpful suggestion will be to really go back to what this group created was our guiding principles. These are overarching, they're not criteria, they're not standards, but they do reflect the kind of groupthink with some very specific goals that we identified. Because what I'm trying to help, and I think the questions are pointing towards this, Karen, that we're trying to look at something and understand it objectively, but we're looking at very subjective proposals. And as one of the architects in the room, and Aaron and I are nodding at each other, it would really help us to have, what is the overarching design scheme that you believe is the driving force for the lighting. And then we can look at now what are the strategies that are going to achieve that goal, those objectives. I'm not going to tell you what that is. That's your job and their job and Keith's job collectively to have that understanding. If you can do that, and I really think you need to do that, that really helps me overall for the whole bridge kind of come down to why are we doing things. Patty alluded to it when he said that horizontal line. That's one of those sort of key principles that we understand for this bridge.
Great. So, thanks, Bob. And I just passed out the guiding principles. And I know Elizabeth, that's why she wanted to put those on the slide so that you all knew that she had really looked at those. So I do want to go to the temperature check. So I'll read out there's 4 variations, as Jackie was alluding to. So the first one is, and we want to do thumbs up or sideways. Thumbs up is like, I like this, it's good to go. Or sideways is, I can live with this, or I don't really have an opinion. And so I want to count those together, and then I'll do a thumbs down count. And thumbs down is, I don't like this, we need to reconsider it. Okay? And you can vote multiple times. If you want to do thumbs up on all of them, that's okay. Okay? Everybody understand the temperature check? This is not a formal recommendation at this point, it's just a temperature check. So the first one is the internal glow. Remember the spotlight on the Gumby, as Susan said. And then as shown on the piers, where it's lit from inside and outside. So if people like that or can live with it, no opinion, please indicate so now. Okay, so I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 either up or down and up or sideways and then 2 down. Okay. The next option is internal glow. So again, the spotlight down on the tower with only the external or the uplit on the pier. So if we only had to choose just that external on the pier, how would you feel about that one? Okay. Ooh. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 downs. And then that was, oh, you're going to make me do math. 4 mids. I don't think there were any ups. Okay. Then kind of the reverse, that internal glow with only the internal pier elements lit up. So only internal on the pier lit. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Still the internal glow. I know, this is the last internal glow. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 ups or mediums and 2 downs. Okay, different option on the tower. This is the lines of light on the, and then the external lighting of the pier. So as shown, externally lit only. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 downs and 5 mediums or ups. I guess while we're here, do we want to talk about internally lit for the lines of light? Okay. Okay, that wasn't an option. I'm just double checking. Okay, thank you. Any concerns? Well, I think, again, I'm going to have you all email me by February 3rd, which is a whole week from now. Any concerns you have about, 1, the bridge design discussion, and 2, the lighting canvas and your concerns about that. So I'll repeat that. But I think, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And Shannon will have you come up and start talking about the urban design opportunities. And I think we are a little behind, but oh yeah, sorry about that. So So the two most popular were the internal glow is shown, external and internal lighting, or the internal glow with only the internal pier lighting. The external lighting of the pier with the internal glow had 11 down, and then the lines of light had 10 down. Okay, thanks for the. We might need to go a little bit long. You know, I don't like to do this to you. I don't think I've ever done it. So hopefully they'll get through, but we might need a few extra minutes. So if you need a cookie, you can get up and get it, okay? Extra sugar. There's coffee too.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Am I good on mic proximity? All right. Closer to the mic, all right. So my name is Shannon Sims. I'm here to introduce Mayor Reed. I know all of you have worked extensively with Carol Mayor Reed as developing the guidelines and through your time on the CDAG. But we have not been here before, so I'm here to introduce us as a studio and what our work is on the project and the individuals. So are you progressing slides? Thank you. So we are a landscape architecture and visual communication studio. I'm Shannon Sims. I'm an associate principal and a landscape architect, and I co-manage our landscape architecture and urban design practice with Jeremy Shane, and Kathy Fry manages our visual communication practice. And together we oversee a 30-person office in downtown Portland, Oregon. And our work focuses on the design of the public realm to elevate a sense of place in complex urban environments. And we really love connecting people to their natural surroundings. And in particular, the Willamette River is both our home and a focus of a lot of our project work.
Next slide. As Shannon mentioned, my name is Kathy Fry, and I lead the visual communications group in our studio. For those of you who don't know what visual communications is, our work focuses on the experience of navigating the built environment and considers the role of information and graphics to provide context. We specialize in placemaking-driven wayfinding, landmarks, identities, graphics, and art integration that connect people to place.
Okay, so I'm going to start with an overview, you can go to the next slide, of just how we see the Burnside Bridge before we dive into some specific opportunities on the east and west sides. So we know it's one bridge, and Elizabeth did a great job of talking about that lit girder that will be a continuous element, and Keith has spoken in the past about that. The architectural efforts to kind of unite and create flow across one bridge. But if you go to the next slide, we also know that the bridge spans some really distinct different zones. There's the Skidmore Old Town Historic District on the west side, the portion of the bridge that spans the actual Willamette River, and then the portion of the bridge that spans and lands in the Central East Side. And part of our work is making sure that the bridge stitches into those different zones and acknowledges those, and it elevates that sense of place I mentioned earlier. Next slide. So in addition to that, from the perspective of someone moving across the bridge, your relationship to your surroundings is constantly changing. So above the bridge drawing is just a series of simplified cross-sections of what that experience, that episodic experience is like. So from the west, you go from being on the street in that historic district with the particular scale of buildings around you, to kind of lifting off and hovering above the street at that kind of second story level, to then floating over the park and having those longer views up and down that green space, to then being over the river where those views expand much further to the city in the context, to then going over I-5, and in our bridge design, that will start to have that focal point. Those cables are going to draw your eye up, and you're going to focus more on that tower as you then enter the Central East Side with a different scale of urban context around it, right? Much taller buildings as you land at the bridgehead, and until you land on the street again at MLK. Next slide.
So continuation of understanding that pedestrian sensory experience, we're thinking about other influences that have been mentioned today, such as sound, visual complexity, and wind and weather exposure. This slide highlights decibel readings in 3-minute audio samplings at multiple locations across the bridge. The large number on each photo is the average reading. While the average decibel reading It's actually a pretty relatively small range and in a healthy audio zone comparable to city traffic, noisy restaurant, or normal conversation. It's worth noting that our perception of those decibel levels is different as our experience changes, and it depends on the amount of visual information that we're processing at the same time, and then different breaks in relief from that sound. For example, on the east and west side, sound bounces off of the building, kind of elongating the sounds of traffic. And we're surrounded by a lot of visual input of the building facades. And at the center of the bridge, we have relief from visual complexity and wide open views. We're aware of the wind, the bridge deck moving from cars passing, but we also experience much longer breaks between traffic, which is a sense of calm and relief, where people may want to linger. The loudest portion of the bridge is over the I-5, which offers really no audio relief, at least at the time that this was taken during rush hour, with this kind of constant hum of rush hour traffic. Next slide. So we're thinking about the experience, and as we explore this urban design experience and opportunities, we're thinking about the history and stories that are going to influence our design choices. This is a summary of interpretive themes and salvage item assumptions that was established by the consulting parties advisory group. Their work is guided by Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, and that will guide some of our work. So 4 key themes have been identified, along with assumptions for these themes to be explained in text and graphics and photos on the bridge. So they're describing a typical interpretive panel that doesn't need to be designed now, but we want to think about where that may land and how that may influence things like materials, architectural patterns, site furnishing, railings, and pavings as we move through design. So the next slide, we're starting to think about locations where these themes have influence and where stories may be told on and off deck. How do we consider the entire user experience and provide episodic connection to these interpretive themes? A key area will be center of bridge, which we're not really talking about today, but that's where we have views of the river and the city and the bridge towers. Key locations off bridge or on park properties where we see a view of the bridge, and it might be a good location to talk about the design of the bridge. But today we're going to focus on opportunities where the bridge touches down on the east and the west sides.
Okay. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to focus first on the west side, so that Skidmore Old Town Historic District, which was mentioned earlier, officially begins at the seawall edge of the river there. Next slide. So the project is required to meet the Skidmore Old Town Historic District guidelines, which are summarized here, and I'm not going to read them, but some of the key guidelines that are relevant to our project are highlighted in blue. And I'm going to further summarize them by showing you some photos, which is easier than reading text on a screen. You can go to the next slide. So a lot of the goal of the guidelines is interest in preserving the street grid and the sense of urban enclosure, the street wall, and the human scale of building facades. And these are both historic and current photos that represent sort of what that means from a visual perspective. There's also a focus on reintegrating the cast iron character of the district. Something the district's really known for are the historic cast iron facades that are somewhat still existent today, but were very prevalent in the past, as well as sort of the rich textural quality and the level of detail that was incorporated in those facades. Next slide. There's other material guidance about encouragement to use stone and brick masonry, ornamental street lighting, and other architectural details that are consistent with the district. And the general overarching goal of these guidelines is to, as new construction of any type comes into the district, that we have the same kind of rhythm and character and texture as the existing historical portions. Next slide. So as you know, the bridge enters the historic district as a simple girder structure. This is a rendering from Beam that shows that much more open, low-profile structure at Waterfront Park, and we were just looking at illuminated versions of this rendering a minute ago. And as has been discussed in the past, the reduction in number of beams on the west side is going to vastly reduce the amount of visual clutter in the landscapes as it lands in the district. Next slide. So an area that we want to focus on today is Span 1, which spans over First Avenue on the west side. So today that's a cobblestone street, open to pedestrians and light rail, and the image at the bottom is a view looking north towards the bridge. Next slide. And then the top drawing here is a cross-section that is an overlay of the proposed bridge cross-section over top the existing one to demonstrate what some of the changes are. So the project is removing the existing light rail station platform, 3 bridge columns and stairs, as well as the boarded up storefront that is on the western wall that you can see in that lower image. And you can see from these 2 photos just how much sort of stuff there is there, that a lot of visual clutter and a lot of things that kind of obstruct your views from a pedestrian perspective on First Avenue. So if you go to the next slide, that top cross-section is then the proposed structure, which is really just showing those 2 bents. On the west, we call that bent 1, and on the east is bent 2, and this is span 1. So it's around a 70-foot right-of-way, like I said before, just for pedestrians and light rail. So really a lot of space down there that will be significantly more open than it is today. Bent 1 is the abutment wall, and it is over 100 feet long and around 13 feet in height. So you can see in the lower image kind of the scale of that to a pedestrian. It's quite large. And then if you go to the next slide, Bent 2 is a different structure. So it's a low beam with 3 piers supported, but there will be transparency. Underneath, you would be able to see through to the parking lot and to kind of NATO beyond if you were looking eastward. Next slide. So this is, given the scale of the structures and their location on this cobblestone street in the historic district, we think this is a really good opportunity for detailing that response to those historic district guidelines. I'm noting in particular here a guideline that emphasizes the reintegration of cast iron facades in the district, that there's a particular goal to do that at the Skidmore Fountain and along First Avenue between Burnside and Oak, which is right where our project is. So if you go to the next slide, we've seen really good examples of ways in which those historic elements have been reintegrated into the district, sometimes incorporating interpretive signage along with them. They're sort of removed from their building context and treated in this sort of more abstracted way that kind of makes them more interesting in their own right. And so we're taking some inspiration from that. And we're in the very early stages of exploring what kind of materials are available, but there are salvage materials from the district that are in the guidelines promoted as something that they're interested in finding homes for. So we're working with exploring what may be available and how that could be incorporated into the Span 1 streetscape environment. This is just a conceptual sketch of how a combination of wall detailing and salvage cast iron items, as well as signage, could bring that rhythm and scale to the wall that's more pedestrian friendly and keeps with the character of the district. And then some of the text on the slide is also just mentioning that, going back to one of those themes identified by the CPAG, that there may be potential also for telling some of the story of the bridge here in this location. And that could take a variety of forms. That could be in the form of anything from interpretive signage to actual location of some of the salvaged items in the streetscape.
Now we're going to focus on the central east side, which does not have the same historic district guidelines, but has similar considerations of how to touch down and integrate into the neighborhood. Next slide. The central east side has a very different above and below deck experience I want to talk about. The images in the top row show that above deck experience defined by the bridgehead development with contemporary high-rises, large scale, with strong rectilinear pattern. The bottom row of images shows the underbridge experience with a very different character, a little more gritty, colorful, industrial experience where we find the skate park and murals. Next slide. In these architectural renderings by Beam arriving on the east side, we can see that the above-deck bridge structures, the tower and cables, are consistent with the scale of the development and creates a sense of arrival. Next slide. Below deck, we're discussing opportunities to respond and integrate with the district in the same way. This is Span 8, the counterpart to Span 1 on the west side. The image is standing on 3rd Avenue looking north. While it isn't seen from this view, the skate park is just to the west of the west wall. The top photo on this is again top photo on this slide is again standing on 3rd Avenue looking north towards the bridge, and the bottom photo is standing in the exact same location with a 180-degree turn looking south towards the industrial scale buildings and buildings covered with murals. The visual difference is striking with some of those photos that you can see at the bottom. Some of it is unsanctioned graffiti, but much of it is Central East Side murals Central East Side has established itself as a mural district and commissioned murals reflecting the spirit and history of the Central East Side with themes that have been voted on by community members. Next slide. So we're early in the process of discussing the opportunities that span 8. The top cross-section shows the bridge at 3rd Avenue again. The elevation at the bottom illustrates the scale of the west wall at Bend 8. Again, around 16 feet tall at its highest and 78 in length where it's solid. There's openings at each side for access, and the skate park, again, is just beyond this wall. On the next slide, we can see the scale of the east wall is even longer at 109 feet in length. These walls are similar in scale to building facades, and they offer opportunities for large-scale graphics or a mural that will better relate to the pedestrian scale and create continuity with the under-bridge experience. So we don't know what that is going to look like because we're so early in the process. We're just identifying opportunities. We're exploring what opportunities for activating these walls would look like. It's an obvious opportunity to hold these walls for the Central East Side to be a painted mural, to be procured through the public art process and maintained as public art. The next slide. It could also be an opportunity for the Burnside Bridge interpretive themes to spill out and connect to the east side. A few key themes from the topics have been identified as relevant to this location and could be explored through interpretive panels, as shown in the top image, or architectural materials such as durable graphic panel system or a cut metal with internal illumination. So we're early in the process, and we don't know what it will look like. What we're trying to understand right now is how these material options and the procurement process will influence the long-term maintenance plan for this area, and that will be kind of key drivers for deciding the direction. Do we want to have time to talk about these or cut these?
No, go ahead.
Okay. To illustrate some possibilities and how these decisions about procurement and materials influence the maintenance, I'll just share a few quick projects of Mayor Reed projects that are of similar scale, just to think about the possibility. So this is Washington Park Station. It's TriMet's only below-grade station. When it was first completed, the track sidewall was left blank for budget reasons, leaving a large-scale, over time, dingy surface that waiting passengers looked at. As part of a station renew project, Mayor Reed was commissioned as the artist team to create 2 200-foot-long illustrated murals celebrating the destinations within Washington Park with playful, colorful illustrations. So those murals took on the color schemes of the original station design, and that along with some new illumination by ZGF team. It was printed on wall covering and a protective covering that can be cleaned and replaced. It's maintained by the TriMet Public Art Collection. The next slide is McLaren Youth Correctional Facilities. A series of 6 murals were created. To meet security and maintenance requirement, the murals are produced on powder-coated graphic panels that are out of the touch zone. The energy of the murals is extended over the entire wall with a simple pattern that is painted and easy to be touched up. In this case, Mayor Reed provided facilitation and architectural integration and hired an artist to create the original artwork. And the last slide is an example from the Washington School for the Deaf, where cut metal gate spans 200 feet between 2 buildings, creating an architectural pattern that breaks down the scale with interpretive themes developed by the client. The material is highly durable. It can be power washed and touched up with paint. In this case, it was designed by the design team and is maintained by their maintenance facility.
If you go to the last slide, we'll just say thank you for letting us extend the meeting time slightly and allow us an opportunity to introduce ourselves. These were just 2 example areas of many areas that we'll be coming back to talk about more later as we figure out kind of the best places and the ways that we connect people with the place of Portland, the place of the Willamette River, and the Burnside Bridge. So thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Do you want, okay. So thank you. I'm going to keep you 1 minute longer. Megan has a quick update to provide about conversations with Parks Department. I know that was a big question at our last meeting. And then I just wanted to let you know, I'll send a follow-up email just with a few points where we're still really wanting to get your feedback and input. And just so you remember, it was around the bridge design, particularly the operator house and the head house, the information that was just presented by Shannon and Kathy around those themes and districts on the east and west side, and if there are comments that could help provide some more insight for the team. And then if there's any additional comments, questions, or concerns with the lighting canvas and kind of where that's headed for our March meeting. And we're kind of looking at March 20th. So I'll get in touch with you about that. Megan, can you give us an update?
Yeah. So I just wanted to continue to provide updates to this group about any progress that's being made on the connection from the bridge to the East Bank Esplanade. I don't have any major announcements this month. I'm hoping I have more in March, but I just want to say we're continuing to meet and the conversations are really going well. I think we're coalescing around a solution, but we don't have anything major to share today. So I'll be checking back in with this group in March.
All right, Patty wants to share something.
Sorry to delay everyone. After we heard last time that Parks is opposed to having pedestrian access directly from the bridge deck into Waterfront Park, I pursued my connections there. And eventually what I found out was that at a Parks Board meeting, someone, and I don't know if it's staff or a board member, said it will be very expensive to build an HDA equivalent ramp if we build a staircase. Therefore, we shouldn't build a staircase. That logic is seriously flawed. The logic should be, we need a staircase. How do we meet the civic law on a DHD equivalency? There are solutions there. One is, as was suggested last time, I think you suggested it, but for the city to acquire a right-of-way through the Stag building, the White Stag building, which is now empty, and there are other design solutions. But if you don't build the staircase directly into Waterfront Park, it's basically a 1,000-foot detour to walk all the way down to First, all the way back to the river's edge. Now, if you're in a car, that may not be very far, but if you walk slowly, it's a hell of a long way, and it's completely unacceptable for Portland. I have no further news on the east side, but there again, I'm given to believe that the majority of the folks in Parks really believe that pedestrian access is important. And it's just that one person who raised that issue, and somehow that was conveyed to the county as a prohibition on building pedestrian access. So I am very hopeful that we will indeed have proper pedestrian access. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Patty. All right, thank you everyone so much for staying a little bit late. If you want to grab anything on your way out, there's plenty of snacks left. So thank you, and we'll see you March 20th. I'll send lots of email reminders. So thank you all.